Recent scholarship has traced the first instance of the widely spread story of the confusion of tongues, usually associated with the Tower of Babel, to the reign of Peleg in Mesopotamia around 3000 BC. Mankind's relatively sudden need to rely on speech, after so many millennia of telepathic communication, would naturally have led to stories about the transition. Within a span of 5 centuries, the combination of the two transition periods, from Treta Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, 3400 to 2900 BC, mankind went from a single universal mental language of thoughts, images, and symbols, to many separate spoken languages. Basics of human language, such as syntax, structure, and vocabulary, would have to have developed quickly. Geographically distant groups of people who previously shared the ability to communicate telepathically and over long distances would have been cut off one from another. Finding themselves suddenly isolated, they would likely have developed independent approaches to spoken language. This picture of the rapid development of language is, in fact, borne out in the study of historical linguistics. Languages contain their history in their spelling, vocabulary, and usage. Linguists have identified only a small number of proto-languages, seminal languages, from which all the languages we know today have descended, including Proto, Indo-European, India, Near East and Europe, Proto-Sino-Tibetan, China, Mongolia, Tibet, and Proto-Arabic Arabia, Egypt, North Africa. All known languages descend from a small number of these proto-languages and trace their development to an earliest vocabulary and structure, and to nearly the same time period, middle to late descending Treta Yuga. If the mainstream theory of linear development were true, we would not expect all the world's languages to have evolved from so few seminal languages in such a short period of time. If, as the linear theory of human development would have us believe, mankind was dispersed across the world in tens of thousands of small groups of hunter-gatherers for at least 60,000 years prior to the birth of civilization, then the roots of our languages should be untraceable, let alone traceable to a double handful of proto-languages. If the linear theory were true, then languages should be fuzzy, complicated agglomerations of syntax and vocabulary contributed to by the thousands of small hunter-gatherer bands, each of which had evolved its speech independently. Current languages should be more like English, which has borrowed grammar, syntax, and vocabulary from thousands of sources. Yet such is not the case. The double handful of proto-languages, from which all other languages descended, all seem to have been fairly coherent and well-formed by some time during descending Treta Yuga or the beginning of descending Dwapara Yuga. The linguistic evidence is consistent with highly intelligent people recognizing the need for spoken languages and developing them deliberately, methodically, and relatively quickly. As mentioned in a preceding chapter, the grammar and syntax of Sanskrit appear deliberately constructed to enable subtle, nuanced communication of spiritual subjects. Up to the end of descending Treta Yuga, Sanskrit remained a sacred language used only for chanting. But with the waning of Treta Yuga man's telepathic capability, Sanskrit was pressed into service as an all-purpose language. Sanskrit rapidly devolved into many hundreds of languages and dialects and reached the largest number of variations in Kali Yuga. During Kali Yuga, India alone had over 600 languages and dialects, at least 400 of which had descended from Sanskrit. In our era, the trend is reversing. As we progress into ascending Dwapara Yuga, many dialects, and even complete languages, are dying out. Lamented by some, this trend nonetheless seems inexorable, an expression of exponentially increasing worldwide communication. Linguists predict that at our present rate of change, 100 years from now, may see only a handful of spoken languages, a reversal of the trend of descending Dwapara Yuga, and a foreshadowing of a time when mankind once again speaks one shared telepathic language. It is interesting to note that linguists have long wondered why spoken language was so slow to develop, even though individual and group interaction had been commonplace for a very long time beforehand. It is difficult to reconcile the existence of sophisticated artifacts from the 4th to 10th millennia BC, sacred sites, settlements with thousands of people, advanced cave paintings, elaborately made statues, and beautiful carvings of gods and goddesses with a very crude level of communication. As in our examination of the theory of the Neolithic Revolution, we have to conclude either that man was incredibly stupid, or that there is something wrong with the current theory of the development of language. Spoken languages proliferated rapidly at the beginning of descending Dwapara Yuga, not because man suddenly figured out how to communicate, but because man suddenly needed to communicate via the spoken language.